Hello and welcome. This is Hugo Doyle. I run international public affairs at Intesa Sanpaolo, the Italian bank. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to talk today with Ambassador David Thorne, who is connected via Zoom from his nice house in Boston. David is a great friend of Italy and a true personal friend. Hello, David.
Hi, Hugo.
Hi there.
Glad to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. So I thought, David, in these next few minutes, we could talk about some angles that you have lived directly relating to American culture and American culture in Italy. But before doing that, I just wanted to give our audience some additional points on your remarkable CV, which is obviously very well known. So Ambassador Thorne has a CV that has started in the US, where he was born, but then had a very important part in Italy, not only as ambassador, but in his early days and as a youth and a teenager. His academic part, the academic part of your CV includes graduating from Yale University with a BA in American history, and then receiving a master's degree in journalism from Columbia. You then went on to serve in the US Navy in the late 60s, in those crucial and very delicate years for the US and for the world, including being posted to Vietnam. And that's an experience which brought you to author a book called The New Soldier with John Kerry. Actually, David turned his passion for journalism into solid business, setting up a very successful publishing activity. Let me say that art and culture feature high in David's CV, and he's actually the former president and board member of the Institute of Contemporary Art in Boston, and now sits on its board of trustees. But culture is not the only part of David's activities. He currently has a very important role in the Biden administration. Ambassador Thorne is actually the senior advisor to John Kerry, special presidential envoy for climate. So, David, if you're okay, I would mention that you're actually in a unique position to speak at the Festival di Cultura Italiana organized by the Centro Studi Americani, and with its focus on gli italiani in America. Because actually, I feel that you are an Italiano in America. I mean, you are the reverse of the famous song of Fred Buscaglione, Tu vo fa l'americano, ma sei made in, sei nato in Italy, if I can put it that way. And this link to Italy is not only due, as I mentioned, to the fact that you were sworn in as US ambassador to Italy in 2009. Your link to this country is a lifelong personal link, considering that you moved with your family in 1953 to Rome, that was coming out of the dreary years of the war, when your father, Landon Thorne Jr., was appointed actually by President Eisenhower to administer the Marshall Plan for Italy. And it's not a secret that the Marshall Plan was one of the cofactors that triggered what is very well known as the Miracolo Economico Italiano. But actually, in your early years in Italy, in Rome, you got to develop, and I can speak from my own personal experience, a deep knowledge of Italy's culture, of Italy's politics and society, and let me say also a command of the Italian language, which is remarkable in itself, and let me say also remarkable compared to other distinguished diplomats that have visited Villa Taverna. Your nuances of the Romanesco talk is quite something that is worth trying. But okay, let's actually start our discussion, David, if I may, from the Marshall Plan. And you were in a center stage as a youth, seeing it rolling out in Italy. And I won't go through the economic benefits of the plan, but would you say that the Marshall Plan had a cultural dimension that brought Italy to, how can I put it? Italy and the US reaffirmed also through the Marshall Plan at the cultural level the values that are part of what we call the like-minded democracies of the West.
Sure. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you today, and per tutti i soci del centro studi, buongiorno o buonasera, credo, and I'm very pleased to be able to speak with you. It was very interesting, leading off from from Hugo's question. I was 8 years old when I arrived in Italy in 1953, and never been out of the country, and we arrived in in a country that was still really quite shattered by the war, and the the impressions of the difficulties that everyone was still having as a part of life. And certainly, we were very still, my brother and I were very aware of the presence of the war. And we were finding German ammunition in our garden in Rome, so for kids, it made it very real. But in any event, that was sent with the Marshall Plan. And of course, the Marshall Plan was intended to put Europe back on its feet. And it was interesting because here's a country that was trying to put the people that it had been fighting, some of the people that had been fighting its war against the Germany, and in that case, for at least part of the war, the Italians. And we were interested in creating stability in Europe, and that meant all of Europe. And so we wanted to help everyone. And actually, Germany came in for more financial help through the Marshall Plan than any other country in Europe, France, and then Italy. And it was it's very interesting because there's some echoes of that today, and actually what I'm doing on climate. And the Marshall Plan not only helped revive Italy. Initially, it was very much like an aid program. It started in 1948, and it was helping displaced people, of which there were millions in Europe and everything like that, and then began to rebuild industries across all of Europe, including Italy. But one of the things that it did, and again, I've learned this since, and that at the time I was just a kid watching things, and one of the things that it did was to rebuild or tear down barriers within Europe, so that it was really the foundation of what has become the EU at this point, because it was purposely trying to break down old, established patterns of hostilities and trade and everything else. So it was just a huge contributor, I think, to a new environment that then also allowed concessionary finance, which is sort of a concept that we're now dealing with in the climate challenge, which would then stimulate sources of capital within each of the countries to further engage and further risk for, and accelerate development. And it accelerated things very fast. But it was aspects like breaking down the barriers and providing stimulant capital to that's high risk capital, high risk investment, if you want to call it that, to really get things going. And it's a model that has been used over and over again, even though everybody always calls for it. Marshall Plan.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Of course. But your point on breaking down barriers, in the initial phases of the Marshall Plan, there were some concerns in Europe, also in Italy, that there was effectively an economic takeover of the U.S. In European countries, in Italy for sure, that concern was raised. Would you say that, I wouldn't want maybe to go into the economic side too much, but maybe a bit on the cultural side. Do you think that there was a concern that there was also a cultural takeover, given that the economic takeover was shown to be wrong because it was what the Chinese would call a win-win strategy at the end of the day?
Sure.
Both sides gained very much. I was
Sure,
wondering what your thoughts were on the cultural side.
Yeah,
of
but
takeover.
I think that, you know, it's easy to look back and have some clear vision as to how it all turned out. But at the time, you know, I remember just a little anecdote of sitting at a table with some prominent Italians, and I was just a little ragazzino, but sitting there, listen to my father, listen to complaints from these prominent Italian business people saying, well, this is just a CIA plot to for America to sort of the Marshall Plan, just to take over, you know, business in Europe, business in Italy, and you know, we're very suspicious about what the end result of this. And I remember, you know, I was 10 years old, 8 and 10 years old. I was thinking, well, that's a little ungrateful. I thought this was you know, this was something we were giving. It amounted to more than $200 billion in today's dollar.
Yeah.
Why are people so ungrateful? This is a kid's view of the world, and the truth is that it's very understandable, because it's the first time it had really been done this way, and it really been I mean, through the generosity, but an intentional generosity to stimulate the whole thing to get going. And I think that, of course, as both cultures got used to each other, this brand new concept of helping the enemy and helping, you know, putting money into a country that was well-meaning. It doesn't mean that some American businesses did not benefit, but of course the benefit to Italy was extraordinary, and built a lasting rapport between, in many European countries, of course, the foundation of, you know, New World Order, but especially toward Italy, a warmth and an appeal that has lasted forever. And, you know, even this year, I've heard that over 3 million this summer, 3 million Americans visited Italy. You know, once the pandemic.
I'm sure the strength of the dollar helps there, but
well,
these things happen even when the dollar is weak. So
you're saying the same thing about the suspicion of the Marshall Plan. So
exactly.
you know, but it's, you know, it benefits both, and there's a great warm feeling between our two countries.
Absolutely. Being an American citizen living in Italy, I can vouch for that.
Well, in those days,
actually,
it was really extraordinary.
It sure was. But you mentioned here and there in our conversation the current climate change. So let me fast forward to the current situation, if I may. And after COVID, the European Union came up with what has been labeled by some observers as their own EU Marshall Plan, actually the European Union Recovery and Resilience Plan or Facility, whose name echoes a bit the official name of the Marshall Plan,
right,
which was the European Recovery Program.
Right.
So I was just wondering, also now with the extreme challenge posed by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, do you see space for a new Marshall Plan in Europe, or is the new frontier a more global one where maybe climate is the real aspect that needs to be tackled, and Marshall Plans for geopolitical tensions belong to a different era?
You know, it's a sort of a sweeping question, but I think that I think the idea of applying a Marshall Plan type mentality to climate is what we're all working on right now. Actually, financing, providing enough financing, and I'm talking trillions of dollars, to accelerate the green transition. And so I think it all came from, the initial impulses of the Marshall Plan. And I think the European recovery, the European act of creating all this money, of which your Prime Minister Mario Draghi was so effective at bringing a lot of money, particularly to Italy, is an example of people sort of got the message that we've got to make money available to accelerate these kinds of pass it through these kinds of crises. And of course, above all, the climate crisis is the great existential threat for us all. And I think that that we are still, I mean, one of the main things in our office right now is to try to generate financing mechanisms that can accelerate investment and green transition investment in countries, frankly, all over the world, but in particular Europe. And Europe's doing a pretty good job at it. I mean, in some ways, they're doing better than we are. But now we've created this Recovery Act, the IRA, and that has going to stimulate enormous amount of investment for climate transition. And we're very excited about it. And I think in ways that people don't yet realize. But taking it back to the Marshall Plan, it's just so, it's a similar mechanism about how do you get yourself out of problems and not just, form a solution that creates further problems down the road. When it comes now to Ukraine, there definitely is going to have to be some kind of form of a Marshall Plan to get Ukraine back on its feet if we can ever have any kind of stability and peace as soon as that arrives, and hopefully sooner than later. But, the country's been devastated, and it's going to take an enormous amount of money from all of us to help create a stable, prosperous democracy in that country.
Of course.
But it's worth doing.
But actually, an item that puts together the climate challenge, the transition finance that you were mentioning, and what is happening in Ukraine is, from my perspective, and I was wondering what your thoughts are, what we're seeing, and it's quite remarkable in terms of the increasing support that North America is giving to Europe in terms of LNG carriers, of ships that are crossing. It reminds me a bit of the Berlin blockade in a different context. But I counted at the last take more than 80 LNG carriers going from North America to Europe.
Yeah.
Of course, it's only a small fraction compared to the gas that has been cut off by Russia, but it's a significant trend, and it's an accelerating trend, and it puts together transition finance, the climate change enormous challenge, and the realities of Russia or of the Ukraine situation.
Yeah, I think it's it's all hands on deck in the sense of we're trying to find every way to back up Europe from its challenges with cutting off or being cut off from Russian energy sources and gas. And I saw that picture about the cavalry has arrived, or is arriving none too soon. And in some ways it is that way. But I'm finding, having talked with some of the key leaders of climate, Professor Cingolani, who was the head of the Italian climate action, and they're finding people are finding new sources, and they're getting new sources from the U.S. that we can provide, and they're getting new sources from Africa, and it's rearranging.
Absolutely.
Petropolitics.
Absolutely. And it will contribute to the overall stance of like-minded democracies, also on the cultural front. I'm sure this further intensification of economic dialogue and cross relationships of trade. But Ambassador, thank you so much for your time. We don't want to exploit too much your precious
My
minutes.
brain power.
Absolutely. And thanks for having been part of this festival. We look forward to seeing you in person in the near future.
Well, I want nothing more than to be with you all over there as soon as I can, and it's been a little hard traveling, but now it's much better. And I've certainly been in Italy a number of times over the last, even during the COVID. So saluti a tutti. Per me Italia sempre grande. Grazie.
Grandissimo. Thank you. Grazie mille, ambasciatore. A presto.